3 aircraft. That is all it takes. Not a carrier strike group, not an armored division, not a fleet of stealth fighters. 3 B-2 Spirit bombers parked on a concrete apron in the middle of the Indian Ocean, 1,000 miles from the nearest landmass, and the entire strategic calculation of a war changes overnight. On February 19th, 9 days before the first Tomahawk left its tube, open-source satellite imagery captured something at Diego Garcia that the Pentagon did not announce, did not confirm, and did not deny. 3 matte black flying wings on the flight line, maintenance crews in full-body protective suits, fuel lines running, ordnance carts nearby. The kind of preparation that does not happen for a training rotation. The images sat on commercial satellite platforms for 11 days. Defense journalists saw them, analysts flagged them, and almost nobody understood what they meant. Because the question everyone asked was the wrong one. Everyone asked, are we going to bomb Iran? Nobody asked the question that actually mattered. Why does moving 3 aircraft to a specific island, 11 days before the shooting starts, completely change what those aircraft can do? That answer is not about the B-2. It is about physics, geography, and a calculation Iran spent 40 years getting wrong. Subscribe to War Vision. We do not report the news. We decode why the news happens before it makes the headlines. If you already understand why Diego Garcia exists, and you want to skip straight to the targeting math, type GHOST in the comments. If you're new here, stay with me, because the geography lesson is the whole story. To understand why this move matters, you need to understand the machine that made it necessary. The B-2 Spirit costs $2.1 billion per aircraft, not per squadron, per aircraft. The United States Air Force owns 20 of them. 1 was lost in 2008 on takeoff in Guam. 19 remain. Each one is irreplaceable in a time frame shorter than a decade. The production line closed in 1997 and cannot be reopened quickly. This is not a weapon you risk lightly. Now here is the problem that the B-2's extraordinary capability creates. That capability has a geography requirement attached to it. The B-2 is a strategic bomber. It was designed during the Cold War to penetrate Soviet air defenses and strike hardened targets. High-value, deeply buried reinforced concrete installations that conventional bombs cannot reach. It carries the GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator, a 30,000-pound bunker-busting weapon so large that only 1 aircraft in the American inventory can carry it. The B-2 can carry 2. But here is what every headline about the B-2 misses. The B-2 has a combat range of approximately 6,000 nautical miles unrefueled. With aerial refueling, that range becomes theoretically unlimited. But theoretically unlimited is not a mission plan. It is a physics assumption. Refueling windows are finite. Tanker aircraft have their own vulnerabilities. And here is the number that actually matters. Sustained strike tempo. Flying a B-2 from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri to Iran and back is an approximately 34-hour round trip. 1 aircraft, 1 crew. 1 mission every 34 to 36 hours, minimum, before maintenance requirements intervene. That is not a strike campaign. That is a one-time demonstration. The Pentagon needed something different. They needed tempo. Repeated, sustained, predictable strike capability against hardened targets over days and weeks, not hours. And tempo requires one thing the B-2's home base in Missouri cannot provide. Proximity. Let us do the geography that changes the math entirely. Diego Garcia is a coral atoll in the Chagos Archipelago, British Indian Ocean territory. Its coordinates, 7 degrees south latitude, 72 degrees east longitude. It sits 2,670 nautical miles from the Strait of Hormuz. Now run the numbers. From Whiteman, AFB, Missouri to Hormuz, approximately 6,700 nautical miles. Round trip, 13,400 nautical miles. Flight time one way, roughly 17 hours. Total round trip with target time, 34 to 36 hours. From Diego Garcia to Hormuz, 2,670 nautical miles. Round trip, 5,340 nautical miles. Flight time one way, roughly 6.5 hours. Total round trip, 15 hours. That is not a marginal improvement. That is the difference between 1 sortie every 36 hours and potentially 2 sorties every 24 hours per aircraft. 3 B-2s operating from Missouri produce a theoretical maximum of 3 strike sorties per day against hardened Iranian targets. And that assumes no maintenance delays, no weather, no tanker conflicts. 3 B-2s operating from Diego Garcia, with full maintenance crews and pre-positioned munitions, produce up to 6 strike sorties per day. The same aircraft, the same crews, the same weapons, twice the output. Now add the munition that makes the location decision irreversible. The GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator weighs 30,000 pounds. It is specifically designed to penetrate 200 feet of reinforced concrete before detonating. There's only 1 aircraft in the American inventory that can carry it, the B-2, and it can carry exactly 2 per sortie. Iran's most critical hardened targets, Fordo nuclear facility, buried IRGC command nodes inside the Zagros Mountains, deep ballistic missile storage tunnels, were specifically constructed to defeat every other weapon in the American arsenal. The F-35 cannot reach them, the F-15 cannot reach them, the Tomahawk cruise missile cannot reach them. The penetration depth of a Tomahawk warhead against 200 feet of reinforced concrete is measured in disappointment. The B-2 with a GBU-57 is not one option in the target set. It is the only option, and the only aircraft that can carry it was parked on an island in the Indian Ocean 11 days before the war started. That is not a coincidence. That is a timeline. Here is what the 11-day head start actually means in operational terms. Moving a B-2 is not like moving an F-16. You cannot land a B-2 at a standard airfield, refuel it, and continue. The B-2's stealth coating, a composite radar-absorbent material applied across every surface of the airframe, is environmentally sensitive. Heat, humidity, and salt air degrade it. Diego Garcia sits in the tropics, 7 degrees from the equator, in one of the highest humidity environments on the planet. The Air Force solved this problem by constructing climate-controlled hangars specifically designed for the B-2 at Diego Garcia. But constructing, testing, and certifying those facilities takes weeks, not days. Deploying the maintenance crews, the specialized coating inspection equipment, the ordnance handling infrastructure for 30,000-pound penetrators, all of it requires pre-positioning before the first aircraft lands. The 11 days before the satellite images appeared were not the beginning of the preparation. They were near the end of it. The actual preparation began somewhere between 30 and 45 days before the first bomb dropped, before any public announcement, before any visible buildup, while diplomatic channels were still active and the White House was still issuing statements about negotiations. The B-2s landed at Diego Garcia on a date the Pentagon has not confirmed, but the satellite imagery from February 19th shows aircraft that are clearly in a settled operational posture, not newly arrived, but maintained, serviced, and ready. This is what modern strategic signaling actually looks like. Not a press release, not a carrier transiting the Strait of Gibraltar on live news, a matte black aircraft in a climate-controlled hangar on a coral atoll, doing nothing, visible to anyone with a commercial satellite subscription, understood by almost no one. And Iran understood it perfectly. Here is how we know. On February 22nd, 3 days after the satellite images appeared, Iranian state media published a statement from IRGC Aerospace Force Commander Amir Ali Hajizadeh. He did not mention the B-2s directly. He announced that Iran had hardened and dispersed its critical military infrastructure and that certain facilities had been relocated to positions beyond the reach of the enemy's conventional arsenal. Read that carefully. He did not say beyond the reach of the enemy. He said beyond the reach of the enemy's conventional arsenal. That is a precise and deliberate distinction. The IRGC commander was publicly acknowledging that Iran knew the B-2 was coming and knew what it was coming to destroy. The dispersal announcement was not confidence. It was a damage limitation statement made for domestic consumption, issued because the regime understood that certain targets were about to stop existing. Now, let us run the equation on what that dispersal actually accomplishes. A hardened underground facility like Fordow takes years to construct, billions of dollars, and requires specific geological conditions. The right mountain, the right rock density, the right depth. You cannot relocate Fordow. You cannot pick up 200 feet of reinforced concrete and move it to a new mountain. What Iran could disperse were the mobile elements. Ballistic missile launchers on transporter erector launchers, command and control equipment, senior personnel. But the infrastructure itself, the tunnels, the centrifuge halls, the storage vaults for fissile material, those have one address. And that address was already mapped. Iran's dispersal announcement told the Pentagon two things simultaneously. First, Iran knew the targeting list. Second, Iran could not change what was on it. The B-2 at Diego Garcia did not need to fire a weapon to begin coercing Iranian decision-making. Its presence, once confirmed by satellite, began influencing Iranian military decisions 9 days before the war started. That is deterrence working at the speed of orbital imagery. And it changes the accounting of what those 3 aircraft were worth before they ever released a weapon. February 28th, Operation Epic Fury begins. At 02:17 local time in Tehran, the first Tomahawk cruise missiles from destroyers in the Arabian Sea crossed the Iranian coastline. The air defense radar net lights up. IRGC air defense batteries go to full readiness. Every eye in the Iranian military command structure turns to the radar screens. The Tomahawks are not the first weapons over Iran that night. The B-2s crossed the Iranian border at an altitude and on a vector that the IRGC's S-300 air defense radar never resolved into a trackable contact. Not because the B-2 is invisible, radar cross-section is a spectrum, not a binary, but because the B-2's radar cross-section at relevant frequencies is approximately equal to a large bird. An Iranian S-300 battery scanning at 150 kilometers does not see an aircraft. It sees noise. By the time the first Tomahawk hit its target, the B-2s had already released their GBU-57s over Fordow. The massive Ordnance penetrator enters the Earth at near supersonic speed. Its hardened steel casing is designed to survive the deceleration of penetrating reinforced concrete before the delayed action fuse detonates the 5,300-pound explosive payload at depth. The delay is programmable. The weapon can be set to detonate at a specific depth underground, maximizing damage to the facility while minimizing surface blast signature. Fordo's centrifuge halls are buried 80 to 90 meters underground under a mountain with natural rock overburden providing additional protection. This is a facility that was specifically constructed to survive a strike from any weapon that existed when it was built. The GBU-57 was built after Fordo was designed. It was built specifically to solve Fordo. 2 weapons per aircraft, 3 aircraft, 6 penetrators over a single target complex in a single night. The structural analysis has not been published. The damage assessment remains classified. But here is what the open source record shows. 3 weeks after the first strike night, no Iranian official has publicly claimed that Fordo is operational. No satellite imagery has shown resumed activity at the facility, and the IAEA inspectors who previously monitored the site have not been granted access. An absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, but a facility that took a decade to build and 6 GBU-57s in a single night is not a facility that resumes operations on a normal schedule. The B-2 did not make the headlines that morning. The Tomahawks did. The aircraft that changed the most consequential targets of the war did its work before dawn, without a press briefing, and flew back to a coral atoll 2,670 miles away. That is what the satellite images meant. Here is what we do not know, and the distinction matters. Damage assessments for underground hardened facilities are genuinely difficult. Ground-penetrating radar, seismic analysis, and signals intelligence all contribute to the picture, but none of them give you a clean answer quickly. The classification of the BDA, Battle Damage Assessment, for Fordo is almost certainly not laziness. It is uncertainty. A GBU-57 that penetrates to 180 feet in one geological formation may penetrate to 120 feet in another. Rock density, water table, tunnel reinforcement geometry. These variables affect the outcome in ways that cannot be perfectly modeled in advance. The honest position is this. The B-2 strikes almost certainly caused severe and sustained damage to Fordo's operational capability. Whether that damage constitutes destruction of the program's timeline or a significant setback to it is a question that will take months to assess and years to fully understand. What is not uncertain is the decision geometry that the Diego Garcia deployment created. The B-2s were there. Iran knew they were there. Iran's dispersal decisions before the war were shaped by knowing they were there. The targeting of hardened facilities that no other weapon can reach happened because they were there. Whether Fordo is rubble or damaged but repairable does not change the equation of why the prepositioning decision was correct. It changes the magnitude of the outcome, not the logic of the strategy. Now step back from the individual aircraft and look at the full picture of what the Diego Garcia deployment accomplished. Before the B-2s arrived at Diego Garcia, the American strike architecture had a ceiling. Tomahawks could reach anything above ground. F-35s could reach hardened surface targets. But deeply buried, reinforced facilities, the targets Iran specifically built to survive American air power, existed in a protected category. Iran's planners believed that architecture was survivable. After the B-2s arrived at Diego Garcia, that ceiling did not just rise, it was removed. Here is the convergence equation. Tomahawks handle command and control nodes, airfields, naval bases, surface infrastructure. Cost per strike, 2 million volume, 850 launched. Coverage, wide, deep, sustained. F-35s and F-15EXs handle air defense suppression, time-sensitive surface targets, close air support for the naval corridor, speed, flexibility, reactable to emerging targets. B-2s handle the targets that define the strategic outcome. Hardened underground facilities, deeply buried weapons storage, the infrastructure Iran built specifically to survive everything else. These are not high-volume targets. There are perhaps 12 to 15 facilities across Iran that require this specific capability. The B-2 does not need to be everywhere. It needs to be able to reach those 15 addresses. Diego Garcia puts all 15 addresses within a 15-hour round trip. 3 layers, 3 cost structures, 3 different target categories. None of them alone wins the campaign. All 3 together remove every category of protected target from Iran's inventory. Iran's entire strategic architecture was built on one assumption, that certain things were survivable, underground facilities were survivable, deeply buried command nodes were survivable, nuclear infrastructure was survivable. The B-2 deployment to Diego Garcia was the moment that assumption stopped being true, not when the first bomb dropped. The moment the satellite showed 3 matte black wings on a coral airstrip 11 days before the shooting started. Iran could read that image. They understood exactly what it meant. The dispersal announcement came 3 days later. The B-2 began reshaping Iranian decisions before it left the ground. This is not a story about a stealth bomber. This is a story about what pre-positioning actually means in modern warfare, and why the most consequential military decisions of a conflict often happen weeks before anyone is paying attention. The Navy moved carrier strike groups into the Arabian Sea and the Red Sea. Those movements were announced. They were visible. They were covered by every defense outlet on the planet. They were designed to be seen because they were designed to deter. The B-2 movement to Diego Garcia was different. It was also visible. Commercial satellite imagery is now accurate enough to spot a B-2 on a flight line from low Earth orbit, but it was not designed to be broadly understood. It was designed to be understood by exactly one audience: Iranian military intelligence. This is deterrence operating at a level of precision that public messaging cannot achieve. You do not need the Iranian public to understand what a B-2 at Diego Garcia means. You need the IRGC aerospace commander to understand it. You need the Minister of Defense to understand it. You need the calculation inside the Iranian decision-making structure to shift before the first weapon fires. The F-35 is a deterrent because it is fast and stealthy. The carrier is a deterrent because it is large and visible. The B-2 at Diego Garcia is a deterrent because the people who need to understand it do, and the people who do not need to understand it mostly do not. That specificity is not an accident. That is the design. And here's the implication that extends beyond Iran and beyond this conflict. Every nation that is currently building deeply hardened underground facilities, whether for weapon storage, command infrastructure, or nuclear programs, watched what happened to Fordo. They saw the satellite images. They read the same open source record. They are now running the same geography calculation for their own hardened targets and measuring the distance to the nearest island that can support a B-2 forward deployment. Diego Garcia is one island. The United States has access to others. The B-2 does not need to be everywhere. It needs potential adversaries to be unable to identify where it is not. Go back to the image we started with. 3 matte black aircraft on a concrete apron in the Indian Ocean, maintenance crews in protective suits, fuel lines running, ordnance carts staged nearby. February 19th, 11 days before the first Tomahawk crossed the Iranian coastline, 9 days before the White House formally authorized the operation, 5 days before the IRGC commander issued his dispersal announcement. The satellite showed 3 aircraft. Every defense analyst who looked at the image asked the same question: are we going to bomb Iran? That was the wrong question. The right question was, what does Iran do differently because those 3 aircraft are on that island? The answer is in the dispersal announcement issued 3 days after the satellite image. The answer is in the targeting decisions the IRGC made in the 72 hours between seeing the image and the first strike. The answer is in the hardened facilities that are no longer generating satellite signatures consistent with active operation. The B-2 did not win Operation Epic Fury. One aircraft, even the most capable strategic bomber ever built, does not win a campaign. But the B-2 at Diego Garcia solved the problem no other system in the American inventory could solve. It removed the ceiling on what was targetable. It forced Iranian military planners to defend targets they had spent decades believing were undefendable. It shifted the strategic calculation before a single weapon was released. 3 aircraft, 19 in the entire inventory. Each one worth $2.1 billion and irreplaceable in the near term. Moved to a specific island at a specific time. Visible to anyone with a satellite subscription. Understood by the people who needed to understand it. The most public secret in the opening chapter of this war, and the 11 days before anyone reported what they were looking at. That silence was not ignorance. That silence was the strategy working exactly as designed. If this changed how you see strategic air power, subscribe to War Vision. Drop Ghost in the comments if the B-2 earned its place in this fight. The next equation is already on the flight line. Subscribe to War Vision. We do not chase headlines, we decode the decisions behind them. And the next decision, the one nobody's asking about right now, is already being made on an island you have never heard of.